I know you're thinking, wow, you review a lot of books. There's a reason for that. I read a book every day, 2 days, 3 days, or 4 days. I really read books pretty quickly. I've always been a pretty fast reader, and when I get sucked into books, it's just easy for me to keep going. I'm good at prioritizing my day, and I'm able to spend a few hours a day reading books. And when you wake up at 5 a.m., and it makes it easier, I'm really good with maintaining my time. There are a lot of new books that I'm going to be reviewing, and one is an ARC that was sent to me, but this book actually took me 9 days to read. Okay, so this is called The Size of a Mustard Seed. It is a very heavily Christian book, and it's cottagecore. It's based off of Basque mythology, which is in like a mountainous part of Spain, and that is where this is set. And I had never heard about the Basque culture and how old it is. So while reading this, I learned quite a bit. There's a lot for me to gather. So when I started this book, I knew really nothing about the book or what it was going to be about. The author has an Instagram, and they had a link where you could apply to read it, and so they sent me an ARC, and I read it on my Nook, but also has so much in it, and there are quite a lot of characters too, and I struggle with books that have a lot of characters. So to start off, this book begins with this character named Caitlin, who looks like she's a shepherdess. She interacts with this person who happens to be like a deity that is very well known in their culture, so she interacts with her, but then it changes, and we don't hear from Caitlin at all the rest of the book or anything about her. But then like near the end, they mention her name again, and I was like, wait, who is this person? When I finished this book, I reread the first chapter because I was like, I think I need like a refresher on that, and it helped to do that. So I got really confused reading this book because I thought there was going to be this character named Caitlin, and I'm like, where's Caitlin? I'm hoping Caitlin shows up in the second book. But the main characters of this book, in the second chapter, we hear about Thaddeus. And Thaddeus is this guy who's like on the run from something. He is found in this really old church. There's a young woman named Jimena. She's always cleaning this church. She is a Christian. So this is set in that mythological period, I believe. But at the same time, I feel like they mentioned a car, but maybe it was just my brain messing with me, unless it was just like a type of carriage made. I was trying to understand like, what is the time period? What is this set in? The very early part of this book, I struggled. I didn't enjoy it in the beginning. About 30 to 40% in, that changed. So when I was reading the first 20% to 30%, I fell asleep. I was just very tired. And when I read books that I'm like into, I don't fall asleep. I really get sucked in. And I felt horrible. Jimena, she is a deaf girl. I mentioned in another review recently that I was partially deaf. I was 80% deaf in both ears when I was a child, and so I know what that's like. And they did a really, really good job of writing a perspective of a deaf person. I think though, if you're not deaf, you might not really understand some of the things she does, or it might confuse you because you might be like, how is she talking to these people? She's reading lips throughout this book. Some deaf people are able to speak clearly or some semi-clearly. Other deaf people, it sounds like they have very, very deaf talk. I used to have very, very deaf talk. With practice, you could kind of pass, or at least people can understand you. I feel like that's what she does. She like reads lips mainly, but she does have some sign language as well. From what I could tell, she can't hear anything at all. Jimena, she gets made fun of for it. A lot of people look down upon her. They explain how people treat her, and as someone who has been in the church growing up, some of the things that she's gone through, I had gone through. So I really felt for her because I could understand it and I could relate. So I think this is good for people to learn about what that might be like for someone who is deaf. The author herself is hard of hearing, so she forms this friendship with Thaddeus that she finds and I guess rescues in a way, passed out, but he has like amnesia, but he has a really good memory and he knows he has a good memory, and so he's trying to figure out some of the holes in his memory. He's trying to understand who he is, where he came from. He knows parts of that, but not fully. And because this is a cottagecore story, there are lots of talks of sunflowers, and then she also has a ferret, which is really cute. Throughout this book, there's talk about, now they don't say Jesus, they say, I'm not really sure how to pronounce it. The way it's spelled out in some languages, that's kiss. The Bible is talked about throughout this as we know it. A lot of this reminds me of the book of Acts in the Bible, where you have like the early day church. There are small, very small groups of Christians. The mythology just reigns supreme. And so there's a lot of sinfulness and there's a lot of deity named Mira. The deity has such a hold on people that there are horrible things happening to these people. They don't even realize it because they're celebrating Mira, but at the same time, there's something dark going on. Thaddeus, he starts to sort of uncover that. Now, content-wise, now I had a research after reading this a little bit about the mythology, and there are these interesting creatures in their mythology that were very unique. And one of them includes where it's a nude woman. I'm not going to talk more about what this mythology entails because I feel like this is kind of important to the story. There is a part where a young man is staring at these, and not in a sexual way, but just like, what is that type of way? There is some gruesome things that are brought up. Otherwise, it's very clean, but I feel like if you're an older teen through adult, this is more suitable because there's a lot of spiritual darkness talked about in this as well. There's a lot of scripture that's brought up. And so you see Jimena, she's very strongly into her belief in God. So when she interacts with Thaddeus and other people that she becomes friends with throughout the book, and her love for Jesus throughout it. So once I got to the 30-40% part of this book, the rest of it got really good and I really enjoyed it. So I would have rated this higher if it didn't bore me in the beginning. So I don't know if that's been edited after the arc is finalized. Now this book comes out on the 25th, I believe, of July. So I finished this today as I record this. It is the 15th. This is the first book in a series. Last few chapters, I really got into this. I really enjoyed it a lot. So I do want to continue this series. I did find it interesting. I just hope that because the beginning was such like an introduction that maybe that's why it was a little slower. But come on, look at this. Thaddeus, by the way, he's an inventor. So you have a little bit of the steampunk slightly, as well as the cottagecore. So they have like festivals in this. They have tea. They have an apothecary she works for, Jimena, but definitely very Christian, and I thought that was very well done. The whole point of this is about faith. I mean, there's a scripture that says about your faith being like a mustard seed. So this is about growing faith. For some of the characters in this book, you see how they are learning and yearning for that knowledge of God. It's really like an important factor of this book. So I thought that was delightful, actually. There were little bits here and there. I'm like, well, they could have done without explaining this or mentioning this, but for the most part, it was just really well written and well researched, I feel like, to create this fantasy cottagecore story. Probably a little longer review just because it's an arc and I'm to review this book so people can read this book. So I do say if you're a Christian and you like fantasy books, this book will be great for you. There are a lot of Basque Spanish combination words. So it's like it's a language that like is not common. And so they have a glossary. So if you're reading the e-version of this book, you're going to go back and forth a lot. Another book, Heart of the Glen. This is a standalone novel. This had just come out. And it's funny. So I wanted to read this back in February going into March because it's an Irish book. And I was like, oh, let's get something for like March is very Irish centered. I like exploring my Celtic roots. So I wanted to read something like this. The library is acquiring it. And so finally, just last week, they're like, oh, come pick it up. Wow, that took a long time. I thought when it was acquiring it that it would take like a week or two because it was brand new, but no, it took several months. Anyway, I'm glad I finally read it because this was a really good book. I enjoyed this. Another Christian book, but I wanted to mention the glossary from the other book because there is a glossary here that I had to constantly go to because there's all these like Gaelic words. Gomale shkle, which is excuse me or beg your pardon, Niamh Ida, which is Saint Ide, a woman who believed an Irish lord to have written a lullaby for baby Jesus. Interesting. But, when you look at these words, it doesn't look anything like how you're supposed to pronounce it. So they tell you how to say it. Now, like there were some words I knew, like Cayley, which is a type of Irish dance. And that's because my sister-in-law did Irish step dancing for years and years. So I like some of these I knew, but a lot of these I'm like, what in the world are they saying? So that was fascinating. So I had to go back to this glossary a lot too, but at least I could just like, here we go, right here. So I can't imagine a book like this listening to it instead because I just feel like you have to constantly go back. Like to me, this is the way to read this book and the last book is to have your glossary available rather than to listen to it for sure. Heart of the Glen. I loved this book. This is a historical Christian romance. This is actually actually based off of a real place that is in Ireland, and it's set in the early 1900s, like the 1912, I believe, or so. And it's about this man. He has sheep and he's a weaver. He takes the wool from his sheep and he makes tapestries and different things, a lot of tartan. He makes it in a unique way, the tartan. And this young woman, she goes for a job to be like a head maid for someone, but finds out when she gets there that the entire estate is like empty because the man died and he had no one in his family to leave anything to. So she's like, oh, how am I going to survive? So while she's walking, there's this woman who is the man that is the weaver's. It's his sister that picks her up and says, here, I'll give you somewhere to stay. You could stay in my barn. And she doesn't tell her brother because her brother has something that had happened. And so she's like trying to calm her brother down. And so she just decides, I'll just show him in the morning that we have someone staying with us. So it is about the two of them getting to know one another, working together in different ways. There are some violent things that happen in this, not like intense, bad violent, but there are some violent things that you're like, whoa, that was pretty crazy that someone would do that. And this also has where she had something happen in her family and you're trying to figure out exactly how it happened. You know that her family is no longer, but they don't explain until like over time. So she has a really hard time with God and she believes that she is kind of cursed. She thinks that she deserves to have bad things happen to her. She worries that wherever she goes, bad things are going to happen to the people that she ends up caring for. It's a struggle for her to be around Owen, who she's starting to fall for because she doesn't want to ruin his life with her curse. So there are definitely struggles that they go through in this book, but it's also about finding your faith and how important forgiveness is for yourself, to forgive yourself for things and for you to be able to see that God doesn't want bad things to happen, but when bad things do happen, how you can take that in, how you could grow as a person and say, you know what, I saw God was with me and comforted me during this time. He wouldn't have wanted these things to happen. It's just that there's sometimes people choose bad things that hurt people, and bad things can happen to like anyone. This was beautiful though. I really enjoyed this. I got so sucked into this. I read this in 2 days. I had fun with it. A Flicker of a Doubt. Now the last book that I mentioned for this beautiful fairy cozy mystery book series, the third book was like my favorite of the series, while this book, the fourth book, was my least favorite of the series. It's very unfortunate. And I feel like the problem was that this book, she like ran out of ideas. So she started to like combine ideas from the first 3 books to make this book. And I felt that was like, wait, didn't we already have something like this happen? Courtney, the main character, with her little fairy friend Fiona, they are making, she works in her little fairy garden. She creates these fairy gardens and people hire her and to learn how to do them and how she could do them too for other people, for events or whatever it might be. So she's hired for another event, and her best friend Megan, who we learn about throughout these books, had this love in her life and they broke up because he was not a good person. And the person that hires Courtney, he works for her because he's an artist, and so she wants to kind of highlight his work with this fairy garden event type of thing. Turns out he gets killed and we don't know who killed him. So Courtney always does such a great job trying to find out who wanted this person killed. Why was he killed? Courtney is a little bit harder on people in this book. Like she gives a little more grace usually, but she's kind of like putting her foot down a lot in this and just kind of like, did you do this? Did you, like to people. And I was like, whoa, Courtney, calm down, chill. What was nice about this book is that we learn a little more about Fiona the fairy and about her background and her family, which we had not known much about her past. So that was really cute to learn. But yeah, this one wasn't that great. I mean, there were some good parts, but it was just nothing really stood out for this one, unfortunately. But then I read A Twinkle of Trouble, which is the 5th book. This is not the last book. This just came out last year and I don't know when the new book is coming out, and I look forward to that. But this one reminded me a little bit about some of the other books too. Again, I feel like she's running out of understanding what she can do for these stories, but this one was better than the 4th book. So Courtney is now making fairy doors, but she wants to purchase some land so she could grow her own flowers to use for these fairy gardens. And Fiona has a younger sister who comes to this book, but one of Courtney's friends is murdered. So Courtney is really devastated because she had just started to get like close to this woman and now she's dead. And she's like, who would want her killed? She's got to find out. So this one was definitely better. There are a lot of clues that I thought were really important. This one I didn't get right, like when it comes to trying to figure figure out who did it. Sometimes I'm right, but this time I definitely was not right. And I was like, oh, wow, okay, all right. And then we have another one of my summer books, The Cricket War. This I read easily in a few hours. I'm sorry for the shiny. They put a plastic cover on this from the library. The hardcover books, they do that. So this is a middle grade book. It is based on the boat people of Vietnam. This one in particular is about 1980, 1981, where this boy, he has crickets that he likes to fight against his friends' crickets. And so they like kind of train their crickets. It's very interesting. His best friend suddenly is gone. He knows right away, like, oh, he must have gone off on a boat, because a lot of them disappear and they don't talk about it because they don't want anyone to get in trouble. In Vietnam at that time, after Vietnam War, a lot of young people were being recruited, young men, for the government that they don't like. So it was really why a lot of people were leaving during that time, because they didn't enjoy the communist rule. So this boy himself, this is about his journey out of Vietnam when he's like all alone. And so he correlates it to some of his fighting with his crickets, and it's really well done. The author actually, this is about the author, his life, but he did change some things, and he said that in the author's note, but he didn't change a lot. He even had like the exact same name of the ship that he was on and different things like that. So it talks about refugee life. This one, even though it is for kids, he wanted to teach real things that he saw or what he went through or what people that he knew around him went through. So there are some difficult things in here, but there's nothing gruesome. There is some talk about death though. I found this to be really good. If I were teaching if I had a preteen, if I could go back when my older teens were preteens, I probably would have them read this so they could learn a little bit of history and so they could see what it was like. Because I was talking to one of my kids while or after I read this, like, could you imagine if I said bye to you, sent you off to go to another country all on your own, and probably would think like there's no way to contact you and I don't know if I'll ever see you again? Could you imagine that? And he was like, that's awful. I feel like this is good for kids to learn, and for people that maybe want to learn about refugees and what their journeys are like, and why I feel it's important that we should be caring of people that are trying to escape horrible situations. And the last book, Welcome to the Honey B&B. This was one of my most anticipated books for this year. It was coming out, I think it came out, I don't know, like April or March, might have been March. And I again put this on a hold on my library, and it showed up 2 days before my other book showed up. And I was like, oh, so I read this in 3 days. This one was a little more of a struggle for me, and I was really disappointed and let down by this book because I had such high hopes for it. Melody Carlson, I've talked about how I like her books, and I could see how she enjoyed putting herself in this book in a way, even a little bit of her husband in here. There's something called FTD. She writes about how one of her characters in this book has FTD, but she never explains what it stands for. She says it's something with dementia, but she doesn't explain or say it. And I'm like, so what's it stand for? So I had to look it up after I finished this book. It's frontal temporal dementia. I think that's it. It has to do with a part of the front part of the brain and how it starts to just deteriorate. Melody Carlson, her husband actually has this. And so she wrote this from her own experiences with him. Okay, so let me explain. This book starts off with a daughter named Jewel, who also has a daughter named Cooper, and her daughter is a teen that's kind of not including her mother or listening. She's going through a little bit of rebellion, and she just like sells whatever place she has or even her passion and workplace. And she goes to move her daughter with her. She's divorced, to go back to her parents' place where she grew up to try to help them out because they're getting old and her dad has this FTD and her mom is struggling. Her mom's name is Honey and her dad's name is also Cooper, but it's CT, I believe is they call him CT. So we get to understand what this is like for a woman to have a husband that has this, and it is really sad to see. Like, I feel like they did a very, very good job explaining what that's like, how difficult it would be to try to talk to someone that just keeps forgetting, and then you have to try to explain over and over in different ways without being frustrated with them, and that they're really frustrated that they can't remember and they're trying so hard. Her daughter wants to redo the house and make it a B&B, but the problem I had with this book is that I thought this whole book was going to be about like set in a B&B, and it's not. The B&B isn't even done until the end of the book, and then we don't even get to know anything about what happens to it. It doesn't even open, like it's just kind of like what? And so yeah, I'm going to say that because it's a disappointment. If you want a book about a B&B, you're not going to get one. You're going to get get a book about a family, though, how they come together through hard times. Also, there is a neighbor in this. There is a love story as well. There's like someone that she finds that she grew up around that she once dated. And then there's the family next door, Miguel, who bought land from them long ago. He's lived on there for like a decade or more. You know, CT keeps thinking he stole his land instead of the fact that he sold him the land himself. But yeah, so there were some things in here that I was like, first off, the teen girl, it's like she suddenly is okay with being there. Like maybe, but at the same time, like, I don't know. I feel like there's not enough about Jewel. I don't ever get how she feels about her parents, really. There's not much about that. It's more about how Honey feels and how CT feels. We get his perspective like a couple times. There are bees in this though, so if you like stories with little farm places, cottage places with bees, this is very nice. So it's a good book, but I was expecting something better and I was let down, and I shouldn't have expected something, but by the title you would expect something, right? And it was just a little weird. There were just parts of it that I'm like, where'd that come from and how would that be? So not the best of, probably my least favorite Melody Carlson book. I'm so sorry. But I'm going to read more of her books and see if maybe they'll make me feel happier about her books. So I'm going to probably read a couple more this summer of her just so I feel better. So this is a Christian story as well. It's not heavily Christian, but it's in the background, like where they have to get through things, where they feel like they're able to get through things a little bit better because of their faith. All right. Well, thank you so much for being here today, and I hope you have a wonderful time reading. Thanks for watching and for listening to me go on and on. I appreciate you so much. Thank you. Bye.